Kia ora koutou. Welcome to this episode of Idle Heroes. Just before we get into it today, I have a really important question for you guys. We are here on the FFS account. You can see we still have no VIP. That may change. I just wanted to get your guys' opinion. Is it important to you that this is a free-to-play series? And if so, please let me know in the comments. And if it's not, Lawdog is talking about buying some dice for me on this account because he wants to push our guild's progress and make us more competitive and have more people being able to help push the guild in that direction. So, I mean, technically, I still won't be spending anything on this account, but I feel like that's a bit of a cop-out. So let me know what you guys think. Would you want to see this continue as a free-to-play series? Do you care? And if not, before the events change and the week runs out, we will go ahead and take up Lawdog on his offer and get those extra dice. Currently, we are sitting at 188 stars, so even with the next 2 days worth of dice, we should be able to hit 200, get the 5-star chest to get that third Delacium copy. So either way, like, we're not in a position where we necessarily need the dice, but it is going to push our progress, and being able to get the final 9-star reward will help us out a lot, as well as the gold probably here will help us a lot as well. With that amount of dice, we may even get round to getting more scrolls and maybe another elite 5-star shard. Who knows? I have not spent on the dice event before, so I don't know how much you need to sort of push past the first loop. We do have all the mushroom huts maxed out and 1 lucky dice at the moment, which does help if we do end up spending. But today's episode, we are going to be focusing on the Abyss faction, so it seemed fitting that we were here on the FFS account, and the current state of it in May 2020. With the last hero released was Ithaca. So, and the next week, the new hero will be released. We're looking at, I think he's going to be called Sherlock, based on what they're saying in the spoilers they've released. And he's going to be a mage in the Fortress faction, so it won't change the Abyss, but it may change the video I just did for Fortress. Abyss has a lot of diversity, and there are various different heroes that are decent and some that are really good, obviously at different parts of the game. It is a case of sort of the last 3 heroes are more or less the best heroes here, but that is arguable. Let's start off by looking at Delacium. Delacium is a really cool hero. I love the design they did for him. His damage is insane. Like, he has quite a high base attack, and the percentage scaling for his skills based on his attack is really high. But to maximize Delacium's effectiveness, you do need to build a team around him that is focused on debuffs, because that is what his skills scale on. So that 400% damage you see there is based on the number of different types of debuffs inflicted on the enemy that he's attacking or hitting with his skill. And then he also has a 70% chance to extend the remaining rounds of all dot attribute reduction. dots, so damage over time, attribute reduction, and control effects on the target by 2 rounds. So obviously the control effects doesn't apply in PvE, where he seems to be shining at the moment, but he does have crazy burst damage and is viable in PvP as well, because he's also quite a fast base hero, so his speed is quite high. He does have a bit of control immunity and good base crit, but he doesn't have any sort of healing or self-sustain in that sense, so you do need to get him to E5 with the enable, which for some reason I can never remember its name, the one that is not Unbending Will. When he crits, he'll heal himself. His basic attack is also an AoE, and it does a lot of damage as well. It also gets buffed by the different debuffs on the enemy team. He is a very squishy hero, but just a lot of fun, and he looks really cool. Nakia pairs really well with Delacium. She's probably one of the best. Now with Ithaca, I say one of the best assassins in the game. She has the exact same speed as Delacium, you'll see, 1,218. She has pretty high base attack as well. She's also very squishy. Her damage mainly comes from applying bleeds on the enemy team for 15 rounds, which has quite a decent attack scaling and percentage. And it's amazing that the bleeds last for 15 rounds. Obviously, she is more... Those bleeds are more useful in PvE, because in PvP, they can be cleansed, or with either the enable of cleanse, or a lot of people run Belrain. She does have a bit of versatility as well. So in PvP, a lot of people like to use her for this, so her basic attack bleeds all backline enemies and reduces their speed by 30. So that speed reduction is massive in PvP. You just need her to get off that attack quickly, so you can build her for speed with like a speed crit rune or a speed HP, and put like a speed artifact on her, because again, this is based on her basic attack for that speed reduction of the back row. And then this last passive is going to increase her damage on the enemies. If she crits, she's going to do additional bleed damage for another 3 rounds. Again, I think she's another cool looking hero with a cool design. Her skin is cool, so is Delacium's. She can put out quite big numbers in PvE in the billions, because of her bleed dot and it lasting the full fight. So if your team can survive, she is a really good addition to the team. And the speed debuff on the back row, just the different variations in types of debuffs is going to help increase Delacium's damage, so they do synergize really well together. In terms of PvE, she's going to... Ithaca is going to be a better option to pair with Delacium in terms of raw damage, but PvP, for that speed reduction, Nakia is going to be a better pair with Delacium, in my opinion. Cthulhu is a really fantastic frontline tank hero. He can synergize with Delacium. He already, just based on his base speed, is going to be slower. So when he's in the front slot, when he takes damage, applies both a bleed and burn on the enemy for 3 rounds with Flame Chase. His active is going to, though, detonate all the burn and bleed debuffs on the enemy team. So that's why you want him to go after Delacium, so that he doesn't detonate them all and remove those debuffs before Delacium goes and basically takes away a large chunk of his damage. Unfortunately, there is a hard cap on that. It has been raised when Cthulhu was reworked, so he is better now. And he also is just really tanky because of his other passives, which we'll get to. So he can do quite a lot of damage, but if you have a team built around burns and bleeds, his burst damage is going to be good, but over time, the damage will be... It'll hurt the damage of your team. So in terms of PvE, if your team is built around, like I said, burn and bleed, he's going to reduce the damage output of your team. And also he's going to take away that buff and sort of ruin the synergy with the either Fenler, however you pronounce it, the wolf, so much easier, the wolf, or the Phoenix monster. Because he takes away that burn or bleed, he sort of interacts poorly and disrupts that buff your team gets from the monsters dealing damage against burnt or bleeding enemies. He is immune to burns and bleeds, which makes him great in Aspen Dungeon versus Bloodblade waves, which are a real struggle. And he also just is really good as a solo Seal Land hero. He can push up to like 17 by himself, sort of 16, 17. I haven't tested him out myself, but based on sort of general consensus, he can get that far with very minimal support. Maybe chuck in a few 6-star destroyers at level 100, because when they die, they're going to buff his attack. And this last one is where he gets his self-sustain. So when he takes damage from a burning target, so when someone damages him, he's going to burn and bleed them. So when he takes damage from a burning target, he's going to gain 10% attack buff for 3 rounds. And when he takes damage from a bleeding target, he's going to restore his health by 60% of his attack for 3 rounds. So it just makes him an overall really good tank. Because he's a ranger, you could pair him with someone like Penny in the early game. And obviously, Carrie is the foremost ranger at the moment. She's the creme de la creme, the best of the best. But she's dark, so early game, you're not going to be making any carries. But I'm just saying this because you can then say if you focus on Cthulhu or Penny as your first E5, you can then build the other, whichever one you don't build first. You can build the other one and just focus all on Ranger tech in your guild tree. Let's move along. King Barden used to be good in the E3 meta. You would see a lot of full Abyss teams with like double King Barden, double Cruise, double Scary, or a single Cruise, 3 Scaries, that sort of thing. Since E5 came out, King Barden is... He just doesn't perform at E5 the way he should. He is still a good hero early game, so definitely a great choice for your first 10-star because of his counterattack. Not the one I was looking for. So when he takes damage, he's going to increase his attack for 1 round by 30%, and he has a 100% chance to counterattack, dealing 150% of his attack damage on every target. So you want to run him as a frontline tank, so like a King of Demons or a damage reduction artifact is going to be great if you don't have like a Magic Stone Sword, which used to be sort of the go-to artifact for him, because it also gives him good control immunity. the fact that that counterattack hits the entire enemy team is what makes him shine as a slot 1 hero. But unfortunately, he also does just drop off extremely quickly, basically after 10 star now. You can still use him as like your first E3. But again, I feel like pushing a hero up to E3, if you're not going to use them at E5, it is kind of a waste and it's going to hurt your progress because you then need to save for regression stones. So you can either regress or swap them for a different hero that you then need the correct number of copies of. He does additional damage, so plus 100% against stun targets. So if you do have a Cruz, like I said, pairs well, or like Valentino used to be a good pair with King Barton back when Valentino was meta. So anyone who stuns is going to increase King Barton's damage. His basic attack hits 4 enemies and has a 25% chance to stun them for 2 rounds, so he sort of buffs his own damage in that way and provides CC for the team. And then his active sort of helps keep him staying alive. So again, it's annoying because it only hits frontline enemies. He increases his self-damage reduce by 20% and buffs his attack by 40% for 3 rounds. And grants the King's Shelter for all allies for 3 rounds, which basically gives everyone a 10% damage reduction buff. But it's not stackable, and it's just, he just doesn't provide enough to use him specifically for that buff on your team. But like I said, he's still a great 10-star. Early on in the game, he's still a great hero. And he just sort of has a really quick fall off. So in my opinion, don't take him past 10 stars unless you are a whale or a medium spender, and it's going to be easier for you to get those soul symbols to regress or swap. Cruz is a great support hero. Recently, a lot of supports have come out that have made him less popular, but the fact that he has so this passive gives him, his basic attack targets the backline and gives him a damage reduction for 15%, armor reduction, for 15% for 3 rounds, as well as he will heal 2 random allies for 20% of the allies' max HP. So he actually has one of the best heals in the game. It's just that it is random, so if it was a smart heal, he would be absolutely nuts. So it's good that it's not, because he would be quite OP. Because 20% of their max HP is a massive portion of healing. So it's based on your allies' HP rather than Cruz's attack stat, which is good because he has quite low attack. He has got decent speed, but not that great. You can build him sort of 2 ways, either with like damage reduction and try and keep him alive, chuck him in the front line to get his passive off, which is this one, which is a stun. So when he drops below 50% HP, he has a 75% chance to stun all enemies for 2 rounds. Or you can build him for speed with the stone and a energy artifact, because his active will give a random ally 100 energy. So if you get him to go before your damage dealers, if he's fast enough, he's going to potentially give them a early game active, which can be really good. Just with Carrie at the moment, she's faster. She destroys heroes with energy. She is just stupid. But then he is also viable because of his basic attack giving an armor reduction, He is still a decent and healing 20% of the allies' max HP. He's a decent support hero in PvE. And his active is also going to put a weaken weaken mark on the enemies. This mark will make them take an extra 50% damage, but it doesn't stack. So them taking 50% extra damage is a lot. I think that's more than the shrink on Olivia. Would have to double check. But he's still a good hero. He's dropped off a bit from the end game, but is super viable in PvE and great for like a secondary team in PvP and the IDA or Trial of the Champion. And he does look pretty cool, in my opinion. He just has totally skipped leg day in the gym. Scary. Sorry, Barry. Not a fan of Scary. I'm not saying Scary's a bad hero. It's just you do need to build multiple of him. So he has a big resource sink. And now with new heroes coming out, you can basically pull off similar damage to a Scary army with a Delacium and just building a team around him to support him. So easier heroes to get. So like great support heroes for Delacium are like Sigmund, Cruz, who we just looked at, Nakia, Ithaca, Olivia. It's just those heroes, a lot of them are not necessarily Sigmund, but a lot of those heroes are also going to be viable for you in PvP. So I just sort of like, now that route is an option. It didn't used to be, so Scary was the number one go-to for PvE. But just having that diversity of a hero that can do really high damage in PvE and PvP, like Garuda, I think those are just better options to go for now rather than limiting yourself purely to PvE with building a Scary army that is also going to take a long time. The reason why Scary needs to be built in multiples is because of his marks. They increase his damage, so each Scary is going to increase each other's damage more so. And since I've never built Scary, I'm not the best one to talk about him, but, it's just my opinion. I think Abyss has some of the coolest looking heroes. I think Scary is a very cool, strange looking alien lava type bug monster, whatever he is. But yeah, if you want to know more about Scary, just jump in, read his skills. I don't want to have this video go on forever, but in Abyss there are a lot of heroes to talk about. Berea is a really cool, cheap option for PvE. He's not necessarily going to do much for you in PvP. In PvP, he would need to do damage. He would need to last a long time, and PvP at the moment doesn't last that long, except for rounds where it's multiple carries on each team versing each other, and they keep dying and respawning at alternating times. But so this is what will make him, in a PvE team, he is going to buff himself with this violent attack passive. So each round, as it says at the end, per round, he's going to increase himself by 10% armor break, 15% crit chance, and 25% crit damage. So after 10 rounds, not even 10, after 7 rounds, he is going to be at the cap for crit damage, which is 150%. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's right. And then The rest of them, like, he's just going to, each round as the fight goes on, he's going to do more and more damage because of that. But he also provides for the team a armor reduction. So each of his basic attack has a chance to steal the target's armor by 25% for 3 rounds. So again, he can, in PvE, work with Delacium if you don't have any other sort of armor reduction. I would have to check because I think steal works different to reduce. So I don't know if this armor steal is going to be replicatable. But yeah, if it is, then he is a great cheap option if you're going in the Abyss faction to work with Delacium. And his active is unfortunately only going to hit frontline enemies, dealing 200% of attack against the target and an extra 20% of the target's max HP, which is also going to increase his damage a lot. But his damage can't exceed more than 1500% of his own attack. And again, it will give him an increase in his attack by 15% and 15% of armor break. Now, it doesn't say, there's no like round limit on that, so it is a permanent buff until the end of the fight. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how I take it. And again, another hero that I think looks cool. I honestly like his base form better than his skin. But that's just my opinion. Let's move on quickly. Dantalion is going to be a great first 10-star. He's going to help you in Aspen Dungeon. He's super tanky, so you want to use him as your slot 1 hero. He provides burn with his active. He hits 4 enemies and does extra damage against warriors. There are a lot of really good warriors at the moment, so he is a sort of soft counter to them. He used to be a really good hero if you pushed him to like as your first E3 during the E3 meta. He was almost unkillable because his last passive down the end here was a higher percentage. So when he takes damage, he's going to heal himself at 10-star for 4% of the HP lost. So this is what sort of makes him viable in Aspen Dungeon. He has a self-sustain, he heals himself. Again, this passive is going to give him armor, attack, HP, and extra damage to warriors. And he is going to, with this Fighting Spirit, increase himself by 30% of attack and 4% damage reduce per round for 6 rounds. So, damage reduction, attack buff. He's a great tank. A good pickup if your server's meta is based around warriors like Garudas, Unimax, Sigmund. And he is Wrath of God's favorite hero, or was when Wrath played. Karim is another great option as a first 10-star. Unfortunately, before 10-star, he's going to be pretty crap. Just because at 10-star, he does get self-sustain here on his active. So he's going to hit 2 backline enemies. So he is a decent hero for Aspen Dungeon again. And if he's the first hero you push up, he can sort of snowball. And do a lot of damage against weaker teams. So he's going to heal himself for 35% of the damage dealt as HP, rather than based on his attack stat, it's based on the damage dealt. He steals the target's attack by 30% for 3 rounds and increases his self-crit 40%, crit damage. He has a good 30% base crit, so he is an assassin, that's kind of expected. Whenever a foe dies, he increases his self by 30% of attack. So this is what, if you push him as your first hero, is going to snowball him and make him do more damage against weak teams. And this last one, his basic attack targets the enemy with the lowest HP, dealing 130% of his attack damage and restoring self HP by 45% of damage dealt. We'll look at a 6-star Karim. So on his basic attack passive, there's no healing at 6-star, and on his active, there is also no healing, so he doesn't get the healing on his active until 10-star, and on his passive, on his basic, until 9-star. Let's see. Karim. Okay, Gusta, not worth building. Early game, he is going to have a little bit of CC for your team. He's going to be a frontline tank hero. I wouldn't recommend taking him up as your first 10-star. Like I said, he doesn't do much damage. He's not actually that good of a tank. He's just a rock golem who hits the ground. Fat Moo. Fat Moo is going to be a cheap burn option for synergizing with Delacium. He's not worth taking past 10-star. Him and Gusta are not really worth taking past 6-star until you get to the point where you're going to be building 9 and 10-star fodder. But he can provide decent damage in the early stages of the game. But yeah, don't go out of your way to build Fat. Balrog, another frontline tank hero. He can heal other members of your team as well, and give them a 60% attack buff. Give himself, a 60% attack buff for 2 rounds. When he takes damage, he reduces the attacker's crit rate by 18% for 3 rounds. And when he's below 30% HP, he's going to increase his armor ridiculously by 120% for 3 rounds. But that is below 30% HP, so by then, Aspens are going to be doing a lot more damage on him. And also, guys, he's not a good hero. Don't take him past 10-star. He is going to be a potential early game hero that you can use in the Aspen dungeon, just because of his heal on his active. It heals the ally with the lowest HP, and Aspen, he's the only person there, so he's going to have the lowest HP, so he's going to heal himself. Queen. Queen is going to be a decent first 10-star. She doesn't really get good until 10-star, because that's when she'll get the bleed debuff or bleed effect on her active. Her active reduces the enemy's crit by 25% and crit damage by 30% for 3 rounds at 10-star. She is a good node breaker in the Tower of Oblivion. Because of that crit reduction, you can use her with an energy artifact in Asmodel waves just to get past them. On her basic attack, she increases her own crit by 20% and reduces the target's crit by 20% for 4 rounds, and has a 50% chance to increase her self-crit damage by 30% for 2 rounds. Now again, this is at 10-star. I did test her on this FFS team as a 5-star, and she does still have that crit reduction on her basic attack. It didn't provide this may just be a bug, but it didn't provide the crit reduction debuff box above the enemy's head, and it wasn't increasing Delacium's damage at all. So maybe I or someone else should test that out and send a message to DH Games about that. And she does have a counter attack, so when she takes damage, 100% chance to counterattack, dealing 200% of attack damage against the enemy. Now, unlike King Barden, this is just against the enemy that attacks her rather than all of them. But she does, with her active, deal more damage than King Barden does. So Barden is going to be a tankier option, whereas Queen is going to be more of a damage option. But again, you'll want to run her in slot 1. Margaret provides a different, so she provides poison. She does have a little bit of CC as well. If the target is poisoned, she has a 30% chance to stun it for 2 rounds and guarantees an extra 3 rounds of 102% of her attack as poison damage. When she dies, she poisons all the enemies, and that only lasts for 4 rounds. And when suffering from dots, she is going to heal herself for 170% of attack as HP. That's why she is difficult to deal with in the Tower of Oblivion, because if she's affected by a dot, she's going to heal a lot, and she has that CC. So when there's multiples of them, there are going to be people who are afflicted with poison, and she has a higher chance to stun. She's not a good hero, guys. I wouldn't push her as a first 10-star at all. I wouldn't take her beyond 6-star. And again, like I said earlier, only then when you are at the point of the game where you need 9 or 10-star food would I take her up to those levels. After Margaret, that is it for the natural 5 stars. Some honorable mentions. Norma, everyone's going to get one if you register your account. She is a very good, decent tank early game because once you get her up to level 80 and get to that last tier, she heals when she gets damaged, and she will heal the lowest HP with her active, the lowest HP ally, sorry. And she is one of those 4 stars that you can take up all the way to 9-star, which is nice. So she's a good fodder hero. Destroyer, I mentioned it before. When he dies, he increases 15% attack buff for all of your allies for 5 rounds, which is a really good buff. You can use them in cheese teams with Mim. You can use them in Sealand to buff up your Cthulhu or Delacium, whoever you've decided to go with to try and push Abyss Sealand. And again, he's one of those 4 stars that you can take up all the way to 9-star. Ilaria has use in PvE because of her attack steal. So her basic attack steals 18% of the target's attack. And that's about it for Ilaria. And that's it for the Abyss faction. I hope you guys found this video useful. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, like I said at the start of the video, let me know what your opinion is on this FFS account. If you would like to see it stay free to play as it is a free to play series, or that was what I initially was doing it as, and kind of still have the intention of doing it that way. Or if you don't mind and you want Lordog to go ahead and buy me dice and see progress happen faster, just drop down in the comments and let me know what you guys think. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Appreciate your support. After this week, we should go back to having more videos come out on a regular basis. And stay tuned, guys, for more content and more giveaways. If you haven't already, hit like and subscribe. It will help me out a lot. Ka kite!